G'day folks, it's Vaughan McVilly here from the Mental Wheels Foundation and the Sit Up Challenge, and we're going live again for another one of our Sit Up Live podcasts. And today I have another fantastic special guest. He's a legendary TV presenter and commentator, and if you've ever watched cycling or soccer or football, as we should be calling it, you've definitely seen this man. He has brought those sports into our lounge rooms for the last, well, a long time. We're not going to go say that he's super old, but, you know, like, he's been around for a long, long time. He's an award-winning television presenter. He's a Knight of France. I need to ask him about that. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Tomo, Mike Tomalaris. Let's jump in, get him on board here. Tomo's been an ambassador of the Mental Wheels Foundation for quite a long time. So we'll have a chat to him about that as well. And also he's come on many of our tours. He hosts a lot of our events, but he's also got an amazing story, an amazing journey of his own personal mental health, which I hope to squeeze out of him. So we'll just invite him in. Here he comes. Just 1 second, a little glitch here.
Bonjour. Hello.
Hey.
Welcome. Hola.
Hello.
How are you?
How are you?
Mars. I'm a long way away from you, Vaughnie. Yet you feel so close.
Well, mate, thank you so much for making the time for us today. It's fantastic to see you. It feels like I feel like I can feel your aura. It's amazing.
I can reach out and touch you almost.
Mate, how have you been? It's been another solid year of sport in Australia. We've had the World Cup here, which was fantastic. We've had amazing results in cycling and the Giro, the Tour de France, and right now the Vuelta. You've been keeping busy. How's things going?
Things are going great. You know, I'm not a broadcaster anymore, although I'm hoping to join the Channel 9 team for the Paris Olympics next year. Watch this space. But having said that, I'm not doing a 5-day-a-week job these days, and I'm very, very happy about that. Let me tell you, those of you who are working 5 days a week, it's overrated, okay? The 5-day working week is overrated. I am doing bits and pieces, and I'm very, very fortunate, I think, Vaughnie, because a lot of people have reached out to me since I said farewell to my former employer and said, hey, can you host this? Can you MC this gig? Do you want to be involved in our event, our cycling event? And I'm going to travel all over the country predominantly. I've hosted cycling holidays in Europe. That was 12 months ago. This year, I've done a lot of traveling within Australia, gravel events. There's an event over in Western Australia, which I attended, called 7, which is part of the UCI Gravel World Series. And incidentally, Western Australia will be hosting the Gravel World Championships in 2026. Where else have I been? Tasmania for the Devil's Cardigan, another gravel event. Gears and Beers is coming up in October on the long weekend in New South Wales. I'm actually going to Winton in outback Queensland in about 9 or 10 days' time. There's an incredible and unique event in outback Queensland called the Outback Festival. And among a variety of events, including the Dunny Derby and the thong throwing contest, there's a gala dinner, but there's also a 100-kilometre bike ride, a community bike event. But what makes this event unique to any other community bike ride is if you haven't been to the Outback, let me tell you, it's pancake flat. And the highest rise is probably the speed hump at the local Woolies store. That's probably the highest climb you'll do for the entire 100 kilometres. It is pancake flat. It is outback. It is almost desert. and I'm looking forward to doing that. So I'm very fortunate, not doing too much television, but as long as I can get the message out there that cycling, well, it just does so many good things to the body, the mind, the soul, that I'm happy about that.
Unreal, mate. It sounds like an event I need to get into after the winter I've had. I'm good at going downhills at the moment, and that's about it. Mate, you've been a part of the Mental Wheels Foundation for a number of years now. I'm pretty sure our good mate who I had a chat to yesterday, Hamo, was one of the first guys to introduce you to us. How did that all come about?
Well, I knew Hamish McLean from, maybe about 6 or 7 years earlier, when we did a bike ride from Adelaide to Darwin, an event called the Tour Cross Oz. And we were raising funds and awareness for the Black Dog Institute, which is a mental health charity organisation. And look, I knew nothing about mental health back then, and I knew nothing about long distance riding on a bike back then either. It was 2015, and it was the first multi-day long distance ride that I've ever done. And even though I've been riding a push bike since 2002 for recreational purposes, I had never been involved in a multi-day bike ride like this. So we rode from Adelaide to Darwin via Uluru, a hell of a long way. It was awfully hot. It was stinking hot. I learned a lot about myself in that week, both physically and mentally. Saw a lot of the country which I'd never seen before, and I'm so glad I had. And through Hamo, well, he introduced me to Clinton Hill, who was the founder of the Mental Wheels Foundation, and also through Gareth Pike, the co-founder. And through the three of them, they wanted to know if I'd be interested in being involved in the Mental Wheels Foundation, which had a lot to do with mental health awareness. And I thought, well, this is probably a better fit for me, because I do ride a bike. I have ridden a bike for many, many years. It's got a lot to do with mental health awareness. It's the perfect marriage. So I got on board as an ambassador, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, and I haven't looked back ever since. And thanks to Hamo, thanks to Clinton, and thanks to Gareth, I'm still there.
Yeah, unreal, mate. I must admit, when I first, obviously, we sort of started, honestly, roughly about the same time. I think I'd only been at and I was sort of, I guess, more of a shoulder to the wheel and a volunteer when you first came on board with the foundation. But it was good to see that familiar, big, smiling face back at me on that first tour we did together. It was good fun.
Just on that, Vaughn, if I could interrupt, that ride that we did from Adelaide to Darwin, I mean, I haven't stopped riding my bike ever since. It really was a changing moment, a changing week for me, because I do a lot of multi-day events now. I'm still not very good, but I still get a buzz out of trying to encourage people to put their backsides on those bike saddles and challenge themselves physically by doing these long distance events. 2 years after doing Adelaide to Darwin, I rode with Hamo and many others who have supported the Mental Wheels Foundation and the Black Dog Institute from Perth to Broome. And that's a hell of a long way. And joining us on that ride was Goodsy, Adam Goods, the AFL Sydney Swans legend. And I learned a lot about Goodsy. And I remember him telling me at the time when we reached the finish line in Broome, I said to him, Goodsy, we've had a great week with you. You've taught me so much about yourself, where you come from and where you're going. And the fact that you are such an iconic figure for all Australians, not just the Aboriginal community, but all Australians. And I asked him, what are you going to do now? And he said, well, what do you mean, Tomo? You mean tonight, apart from having another beer, next week, or long term? And I guess I meant long term. And I remember Goodsy saying to me, well, my long-term ambition is to one day be the president of the Republic of Australia. And then the penny sort of dropped, and I thought, you know what? I reckon somebody like Adam Goods would be the perfect first president of a Republic of Australia. And look, those of you watching, you may be into the monarchy, and that's fine. You may be a republic, and that's fine too. But I think, without wanting to get too political, Australia can stand up for itself now. We are head and shoulders above what we were 10 or 20 years ago, or even 50 years ago. And I think it's time that we did move on. And I think someone like Goodsy would become a great ambassador. So I learned a lot about someone like him when I did the ride. But having said that, I do a lot of multi-day rides now, and I love it. And if I can get as many people as possible to put their backsides on those bike saddles, then I'm doing my job.
Mate, I want to jump into something just there that you touched on, because I think it's actually, and I'll put my hand up and say I put my foot right in my mouth about, I think, 2 tours ago, because, of course, I'd known you for a long, long time. I'd been involved in the Bay Crits and all of these bike racing events, and I'd seen you 1,000 times, 10,000 times probably. But in my head, I was like, oh, it's Tomo. He knows how to ride a bike. He's been riding a bike his whole life. I think because we got so used to hearing your voice and hearing your expert commentary on the TV, everyone just thought that you'd been riding your entire life. And it wasn't until that day where you came up to me and you said, am I doing something wrong? And I'm like, yeah, you need to sort of back off the wheel. And we had that fantastic conversation there in, I can't remember the name of that little town, but that's where it was. Yeah, that was quite an interesting moment, I think. And I think, you know, like looking back on it, it's like you can always make assumptions, even though, before that moment, I would have thought you'd ridden a bike your whole life.
Look, Vaughnie, I'm not into racing. For me, the bicycle is a form of escapism. It gives me freedom up here and physically. And like I said before, it gives my soul a release as well. For me, it's about the sun on my shoulders, about the wind through what hair I've got left. And it's not about testosterone-fueled body. It's about enjoying myself on 2 wheels. And especially now, with spring kicking in, it's the best time of the year, if you ask me. The sun's up early, and I'll try and get out on my bicycle as often as possible. So, look, I've never raced. In fact, I lie. I did do one race at Heffron Park in Sydney many, many years ago. It was a D-grade race. I probably finished close to dead last. I didn't enjoy it. It's not about racing for me. It's about the enjoyment and thrill and freedom that the bicycle offers. And by the way, mate, I'm still learning. I'm still learning about how to position myself on a bicycle. And people still tell me, you're not doing this right. People still tell me, you're not doing this right, Tomo. You're not doing that right. Well, I don't mind being told. I mean, if you had have asked me before 2002,
and you absolutely smashed that last day. Everyone else,
but if you had have asked me,
Tomo's just like, woo!
If you had have asked me before I picked up a bike for the very first time, you'll be doing 12,000 kilometers every year on Strava, I would have laughed at you. I didn't think it was at all possible. The only bike I had before I was an adult was my little Dragstar as a 9-year-old. You know, the ones with the ribbons hanging off to the handlebars.
Yeah, the streamers. Yeah,
the streamers. So things have changed.
Unreal. Mate, I want to turn now to, you know, I guess in life you've got to keep moving forward, right? And things can hit you from left and right, and sometimes it can knock you fair on your ass, and sometimes you've just got to get back up and keep riding. It's been a couple of years now since the news came through from your old broadcaster that you weren't going to be part of that commentary team again. Can you tell us, give us, a little bit of an insight at, I guess, the shock and those initial thoughts, and then what you did, you know, I guess in the days and weeks afterwards, other than ride your bike a bit more, because that's definitely spiked.
Hey, Vaughnie, you know, I'm 62 years of age. I've lived a charmed life. I've had a charmed life. I've got a wonderful support group around me, my family. I've got a beautiful wife. I've got 2 lovely daughters, and I've got 3 grandkids. And there was a time before I was shown the door at my former employer that I was living the dream, both at work, at home, and at play. And when I was given the heave-ho for no apparent reason, it came out of the blue, as you say, and I thought this was the first time in my whole life that I have endured a massive life hurdle. I loved what I did. I left a legacy. I've been at SBS for something like 34 years. And I created this niche called cycling, this thing called the Tour de France. I fell in love with it before many others around the country did. And I wanted to share the love to the viewers. And I can remember back in the early 1990s when SBS first had the rights, there were next to no viewers watching. We literally had to record each of the daily highlights on VHS and send them post by post to the dozens of viewers who were watching around the country. But people slowly but surely, and I've got to say, the success of the Australians as well, and other English-speaking riders or riders from other speaking nations, including, dare I say the name, Lance Armstrong, well, they made a huge difference because they were like us. They spoke our language. They weren't European. So there was a bit of an affinity between the English-speaking riders, the Australians, and what the Tour de France, which essentially was a European event, could provide for television viewers at a time in the winter when there's not much happening apart from NRL, AFL, and a lot of people get bored with the traditional footy sports. So they tuned into SBS. They tuned into this thing called the Tour de France. They tuned into this thing that ran for 3 weeks. Didn't quite understand it at first. Why are they chasing this yellow jersey? Why is there a peloton? Why are the sprinters enjoying a flat stage? And why are the mountain goats enjoying the high country? And I remember coming home after each Tour de France in the early days, and people would be asking me all these questions. And there was a time when all those questions that were being asked of me stopped because people slowly but surely were understanding the logistics of an event like the Tour de France. So it's been a slow thing in terms of progression, in terms of development, but I'm proud that I've left a legacy because, like I say, I fell in love with the sport a long time ago, and now the whole country knows. And even if you don't know anything about cycling, people, if you mention the word Tour de France, they know, look, I don't watch it. I don't know anything about it. I know it is a cycling event that's held every year on the other side of the world. And I'm proud of that.
And so you should be, mate. As I said in the intro, I think any Australian who's not a cycling buff or came from a cycling family like myself, as soon as you say the words Tour de France, your name is like synonymous there about bringing it into our lounge rooms and teaching. I guess that's the other thing. I mean, you mentioned Lance Armstrong, and he was a big influence on the English-speaking world getting behind the sport.
It sure was.
The education of the sport and all of those things you just said we wouldn't be sitting in the world at the moment, in the cycling world at the moment, without it being such a big sport in Australia without yourself. So a massive thank you.
Well, look, it was a jigsaw puzzle. It's not just me, by the way, Vaughnie. It was a jigsaw puzzle.
You were the better looking one out of all of them.
Well, you know what? I give a lot of credit to people like Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwin because, especially Phil. Oh, well, both of them, really. Phil had the golden tonsils. He's got such an incredible command of the English language. He taught us the intricacies of a 3-week bike race like the Tour de France. Paul Sherwin also, I mean, he was a former champion multi-day rider, Grand Tour rider. So he stuck his head in the peloton. He's been to places that very few of us have been to. So he taught us about what it takes to race in an event like the Tour de France. So between those two and, of course, management at SBS, who supported the broadcast and the live coverage eventually of this great event, Australians really, we are so much more wiser as a result of 30 years of broadcasting.
Fantastic, mate. All right, I'm going to steer you back into, I guess, your move from the broadcasting to what you're doing now. And I guess that mental health journey that you had, because you definitely went through some harder and some darker times there. And it seemed from the outside looking in that your bike became an even more pivotal moment for you. Is that accurate?
It sure was. Look, the day that I was shown the door, I didn't think it would ever happen. I thought I was there for life. We had the contract for the Tour de France until 2030 at least. And make no mistake, the Tour for SBS is a huge money spinner in terms of sponsors and advertisers. They're clamouring over each other, the multinationals of the world, to get a slice of the Tour de France pie in terms of advertising every year. So, look, I thought I had a safe and secure job, but I've since learned nothing is safe and secure. And I was in a really dark place for a couple of months shortly after October the 12th, 2021, when I walked out the door for the very last time. I never thought, as I said before, I lived a charmed life. I never thought I would be in a position where I started to question my mental stability. I never thought I mean, I really did spiral mentally. I spiraled, and I locked myself in my bedroom for weeks on end. I didn't want to see any members of my family. I was on the computer. I was in panic zone. What am I going to do now? This is all I know. All I know is television. All I know is broadcasting. All I know is journalism. And I loved it. I loved every minute of every day, going into the office or going on location for news events and bike events. And so I was shattered. And, you know, over time, I had lost several friends, colleagues, and sportsmen and women who had taken their lives as a result of post-career drama, I guess. 1 minute I can remember I was sitting next to an editor in an edit suite cutting a news story many years ago. He was a very quiet fella, and it took a lot for me to get a few words out of him. Eventually, I became close friends with him. One day, we were cutting a story, and I said to him, as I left the edit suite, "I'll see you tomorrow for tomorrow's news story." I turned up the next day ready to cut the story. He wasn't there. And I realized and found out that he had taken his life. So he was going through some demons upstairs as well. And in answer to your question, I never thought it would ever happen to me, but it did happen to me. But you know what? I was in a more fortunate situation, because when word got out that I had left SBS, I had received so much support from the general public, from friends, by social media. I literally got up to 3,000 messages of support saying to me, "Tomo, don't worry, things will be okay. Everything's fine. We support you. We love you. Thank you for everything you've done, blah, blah, blah." And that lifted me. But then I thought to myself, I'm in a more fortunate situation, because I guess I've got a profile and people have reached out to me. People have grown up with me over the last 34 years, watching me do what I've done. But it got me thinking there are many people out there who aren't as blessed as I am, who don't have that profile and who have nowhere to turn. So they do turn, but take the last possible resort. And it's probably the wrong course of action. So I'm very lucky. I'm still here and I'm buzzing. And I am 2 years on. I am just looking to the future. And that's the way I've been after recovering from that spiraling effect, from those dark days. I've picked myself up thanks to the general public, and I have just, my mind and my attitude has completely changed. And I'm so happy to be here.
Right, well, we're bloody happy for you to be here as well. I think, you know, you touched on a few really important parts, and I think one of the deep passions that I have personally for the Mental Wheels Foundation and the work that we do is around, obviously, the clinical research that goes into programs that can stop people from going too far down that funnel, as I always talk about, that suicide funnel. You know, like, we have that, you know, I guess social awareness now of mental health is at an all-time high. Everyone knows that there is, you know, mental health problems. But just like you, I was exactly the same. I would never, ever, ever have considered myself to be someone who could go to a dark enough space where I would consider taking my own life. But out of the blue, you know, within 5 to 7 days, I've been from zero to zero, sorry. And I was in exactly the same place. And, you know, I think after, you know, I've lost a lot of friends to suicide as well. I've lost family members to suicide. And just seeing, you know, what support structures they have around them and what things led them to, you know, that decision, that final decision. It's like where we're at the moment with the big five things that you can do to keep your mental health. It's just so important. We can do them every day when we're good. In my chat last week with Professor Nick Titov, he goes, when we're good, we can nearly tick all of those 5 things off in a good bike ride and a coffee, right? Because we've got social engagement, we've got meaningful activities, we've got a routine in there, and we're kicking off a whole heap of things. We've got goals and plans because we're going to ride 100 Ks or we're going to do this stuff. We can do it. But when we're down, we need to be making sure that we have those things in place that we go to do, and also around us. You know, like, I think one of the things that you've touched on that's really important for everyone to hear out there. If you know of someone who, it just might be a loss of a job, it might be an injury, you know, like I've been talking a lot about this just recently because I can't ride a bike at the moment, mate. It's driving me nuts. I've hurt my knee. I can't ride out of sight in a dark night, and I love riding my bike just like you. And so suddenly I'm in a position where a big part of my mental health, stability, and fun and smile, you know, comes from riding a bike, and suddenly I can't do it. You might know someone out there who's in that position, whether it be, you know, they've lost a job, they've had some sort of, and that's when we need to get around those people and then provide them with the right tools. And the right tools are the big five, which is meaningful activities, healthy thinking, goals and plans, healthy routines, and social connection. Whew. I always forget when I do that.
You know, there shouldn't be any suicides in this country. We live in a great country, a very fortunate place. You know, I have been fortunate to have traveled to a lot of the world, different countries in the world, and we are so lucky and so grateful. And I think we take a lot of things for granted. Two ex-cyclists who come to mind who have gone down that black path, you might remember them, Joby Dacre. I loved him. I thought he, for those who don't know, Joby was one of the best track sprinters Australia has ever produced. He's been gone now some 15 or 16 years from memory, and I loved him. He had attitude. He was a mean machine, both on the bike and perhaps off the bike. But I never knew at the time, but he went through a dark period, and he took the wrong course of action. Another one that comes to mind is Jonathan Cantwell. Do you remember him? You know, he was a roadie. He was a roadie. Did the Tour de France on one particular occasion, and you know, it just saddens me that they're no longer with us. And may they rest in peace, because when I talk about them, I do tear up. I am starting to swell up, and I see that you're swelling up. And what's the reason for that?
Like Johnny Cantwell was just a big, smiling, beautiful kid, right? Really lovely, always there to. He always made me smile. Like I remember the exact moment I found out that he'd passed away, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, he wasn't a good mate, but he was, you know, within the circles, and they're the sort of losses that I think, you know, that should never have happened.
It should never happen.
He was such a
and that's another
beautiful guy.
Example, Vaughan. That's another example, Vaughan. Where do athletes, elite athletes, former elite athletes, turn to when their careers? I mean, they were on a high once upon a time. They were up there winning gold medals at Olympic level, or wearing the yellow jerseys at big races. But when their careers are finished, a lot of them don't have anywhere to turn. You know, and we've got to look after these people. We really do, whether they're cyclists or whatever. And it's not just sport; it's business. It's people in the workforce who are suddenly on a high, or they're on a high and suddenly they're not there anymore. I was in that situation, but as I said before, I had support from the general public and my family. If there was no support there, who knows which road I would have taken. We have to look after these former elite champions.
Yeah, 100, I agree, 100%. Big Steve Woolbridge was another one. Like, there were so many, and I think, you know, there's also something about, you know, like, it's happening so regularly, right? We've got every 6 minutes in Australia, someone's attempting to kill themselves. 8 people a day are succeeding. Every 30 seconds, someone's ringing a crisis helpline. You know, like the things that we're doing at the Sit Up Challenge and raising the money with Macquarie University and MindSpot to try and get these programs out there so that they don't get below. You know, like, we need to have these programs in place that, so when you do hit a roadblock, when you do hit something, you know that you can turn to these things that are just going to start to change that direction back up again. Just stall it and start to reposition yourself and start to move forward, just like you did, and start riding your bike and getting out there and doing and surrounding yourself with good people and good food and all that sort of stuff, and the odd vino. We won't push that away. We love the odd vino, but yeah, I think that's one of the key things that I love about the Mental Wheels Foundation and what we're trying to do.
And look, you know, I go out most days now on my bicycle, and there are so many people riding 2 wheels. A lot of them do it for recreational reasons. A lot of them do it for commuting. A lot of them ride their mountain bikes or gravel bikes or road bikes. You know, there are so many different reasons why we should all enjoy the bicycle. There are so many people on bike paths now, dads, mums with their kids. It's a beautiful thing to see on cycleways on the weekend. You know, there are so many layers to what the bicycle has to offer. And so if we can get the message across that mental health awareness and cycling is a perfect marriage, then the foundation that you've been doing such a great job with is leading the way.
Thanks, mate. Well, we've smashed through our half an hour. I do have my little fast five, the big five questions for you. Can I hit you with those? Are you ready?
Yeah.
What is one thing you try to do every day that you truly believe in?
Well, that's an easy one. You know, there was a time not so long ago when I was riding my bike possibly once a week because of work commitments. But now that I've got more time on my hands and the 5-day working week is overrated, I try and get out most mornings. Sure, it's pretty cold, or it was pretty cold over the winter, especially in the mornings. But now that the sun's up really early in the springtime, you'll see me on the bicycle at least 6 or 7 days of the week. I wish there were 10 days in a week. I'd be on the bike 10 days, 10 mornings of every week. So I love it. I love it. And if I can be a role model for people who are just even thinking about jumping on 2 wheels, then I've done my job.
Absolutely. Name one thing that happened to you this week that was less than perfectly, but perfectly okay.
What was that question again? Name one thing that happened this week
that was less than perfect, but perfectly okay.
It's not cycling related. It is something that helped me with my mental health, and that is seeing my grandchildren. And yeah, I'm at the age, I know I don't look like I should be a grandfather, but I am. But look, there was a time when I thought to myself, I don't want to be a grandfather. It's got these old connotations. When my daughter came up to me a few years ago and said, "Dad, I'm pregnant," I thought, "Oh, really? That means I'm going to be a grandfather." Yeah, it does. I had I didn't want to be a granddad. Now that I've got 3, it's a life changer for me. And I encourage anybody with kids, the day will come when your kid will say to you, "Hey, Dad, guess what? You're going to be a grandfather or a grandmother." Embrace it because they keep me young. So I got to see them this week. I didn't see them last week because I was away. And that's it. That's the answer to your question, Vaughan.
What is one goal you've set for yourself that you've achieved that gave you great fulfillment?
Well, I've got to say, riding these long distance events on my bicycle, from Adelaide to Darwin, from Perth to Broome, the Mental Wheels tours that I've done over 3 or 4 days, and I've done 2 of them now. They're great. They're so fulfilling. There's a sense of self-satisfaction when you reach that finish line. This year it was Mudgee. Last year, where was it last year? On the Snowy Mountains, Marimbula.
Yeah.
Marimbula. And when we threw ourselves into the lake, bicycles and all, on that very hot autumn afternoon. That's what gives me a big thrill these days, the sense of challenging myself, and the sense of fulfilling a goal of riding long distances and raising funds for a charity like Mental Wealth and awareness for the Mental Wealth Foundation. That's what it does for me.
Beautiful. Give me one part of your morning or evening routine that you can't live without.
Well, I've answered it. It's riding the bike in the morning, and at night, perhaps cooking up a nice dish with Mrs. T. Tonight, that's going to be spaghetti bolognese. My wife's of Italian background, so the pizzas and the spaghetti and the pastas, they're quite common at our place.
What time? I'll be there. Last one. Tell me about a conversation you had this week that made you feel really good.
Well, you know, I mentioned before that I'm going to Winton in outback Queensland next week. This great event called the Outback Festival. And when I was asked to host the gala dinner in front of 300 people, and if those of you who haven't been to Winton, let me tell you, there's not much out there. It is outback. It's dinosaur country. Incidentally, it's where Qantas, the first Qantas meeting was held way back in 1920. So it's got a lot of history. It's only a small place of 3,000, but on the week of the 20th to the 30th of September, the population will triple with bike riders and many other people. They'll come from everywhere. It's a bit like cycling's answer to the Birdsville races. But this is Winton. And I'll be hosting a gala dinner. I'll be hosting the 100-kilometre pancake flat bike ride, possibly commentating on the Dunny Derby and the thong throwing contest and everything else. I think it's the rodeo as well. So when I was told I got the gig, I was pretty happy about that. So if you're thinking about coming to Winton, it's a long way away. It's on the other side of Long Reach, near the Northern Territory border. Make a road trip out of it, and I'll see you there.
Amazing. Well, mate, I could talk to you all day, and that was supposed to be 5 really fast questions, but I always knew if I was going to ask you 5 questions, it's going to go.
You know, I love the sound of my own voice. You know that, Vaughan.
I love it, mate. Thank you so much for giving us some time today, and also for continuing to be an ambassador for the Mental Wheels Foundation. We love having you on board. You got any final words for us?
No, look, all I want to say is if you are struggling with mental health, if you're not sure where the future lies for you, if you are a cyclist or if you are keeping active, there is support there for you. Come and talk to me. Come and talk to Vaughan. Come and talk to Hamish. There are many people out there who are more than happy to support you, listen to you, ring Lifeline. You know, you shouldn't be in a situation where you're thinking about going to a very, very dark place. There are people out there who love you. We live in a great country, as I said before. There's no real reason for you to go down that path. So think twice before you make any crucial decisions.
Unreal, mate. Well, once again, thanks, Tomo, and I look forward to getting on the bike with you in a little while, probably another 4 or 5 weeks for me, but we'll have to go for a roll soon, mate.
No worries, mate.
Massive thanks.
Same to you.
See ya. Yow.
Bye.